Hey everyone, welcome to the latest installment of MSP Business School. As always, I'm here with you, your host, Brian Doyle. And I'm pretty excited about today because you may hear a voice from the past come on to our show today, but with a new story to share with you. So I'm really excited to bring this individual on. With that said, I'd like to welcome to the stage here, Jake Carroll.
Hey,
Hey
Brian,
Jake,
how are
what's
you?
going on?
I'm doing well. How are you? I'm out in
Doing
Denver. Weather's great. I'm at IT Nation Evolve and happy to join you today.
No, appreciate it. Folks, if you remember this voice, Jake, I used to work with Robin Tim, who used to co-host with me on this, and he used to kind of fill in when those guys needed a little help with a different message around sales. He was known as the professor a lot of times when we
Oof,
did this,
I don't know about that.
and
It's tough for a guy who never
we'll talk
finished
a little bit
college.
about what he's up to now. But Jake's
Right.
been great in filling in a few different times when those guys needed him to, and I thank him for now joining me in this new role. But
Yeah.
Jake, let's kick things off for those that don't know you. Maybe tell them a little bit about who you are and your background.
Yeah. Jake Carroll. And currently I'm at Enforcer, right? Tell you a little bit about those guys in a moment, but had spent 16 years at Autotask and then stayed on through the data acquisition. And then the last 4 years in this space, before I got to Enforcer with OSR Managed doing outsourced sales management as a service for MSP. So spending a lot of time with MSPs in go-to-market motions, right? And in particular, it's a combination of things now with me, which is look, there's for MSPs, there's really no end of vendors that they work with. They've got 30, most of them on average, and each of those vendors has a dump truck worth of data that they can put into the hands of an MSP. So what I'm trying to do at Enforcer now is give MSPs actionable assets that they can use as they communicate with their clients and prospects on all sorts of topics that are important to them now.
And that's interesting, Jake, in the sense that you're seeing more and more the vendor shift going beyond the tools that they provide into the education around the topics that they are strong in, and really
Yeah.
trying to enable their partners to do a little bit more with their clients, right? And
Yeah.
take a more leadership position. So, kudos to you to kind of, taking that role and really starting to build out partner assets that I'm sure cover both tool and process.
Mm. Yeah. And the sales side for sure.
So we were talking before we got kicked things off today, and we were talking a little bit about, AI enablement and how that's working across the community. But
Yeah.
before we dive in, deeper on that, maybe tell the community a little bit about what Enforcer does
Yeah.
and their position in the marketplace. So when we have that conversation, folks can relate back in their mind to the things that you're doing at.
Yeah. So yeah, thank you for that. So at Enforcer, we help partners configure, deploy, and align Microsoft 365 policies, right? Um, and obviously, after those policies are deployed, we monitor and manage those policies to track for drift and make sure that your customers are staying on track with a really good security foundation throughout the entire Microsoft 365 suite. Right. So everything on that you can think of inside of Microsoft that you would need to manage and secure for your clients, everything from Defender and Intune and Teams and SharePoint and Entra and on and on and on, and soon Purview in terms of data protection. And that does play into the topic that's the hottest topic in our industry right now, which is AI and AI readiness. And from an MSP perspective, they're all really starting to get around using the tools internally to be more efficient, better for their clients, quicker to market, all those kinds of things. But the challenge becomes, you got to go out to your clients now with another security message, right? You've got to be able to kind of present to your clients what are the issues around using AI. Some of the statistics would tell you that 70% of small business employees, not at bakeries or pizza shops, but at business, lawyers, doctors, engineers, those kinds of things, are using AI, and only 20% of those companies have any kind of data compliance regulations in place that their employees are aware of and using. So what the combination of things that we're talking about in Enforcer are what's the biggest thing you're trying to do with your clients? It's AI readiness. And then how is Microsoft 365 security the underpinning and foundation of doing that to gain the benefit of it, but yet not expose yourself to undue risk as a small business owner?
Yeah, it's funny. You're spot on with that. I think the control points around AI is really one of the biggest struggles that the traditional user or traditional business is having as they introduce it into their environment. Big topic of conversation, obviously, amongst my PRC clients over at VCIO Toolbox is really getting AI policies in place and how to enforce them, right? And
Hmm.
but yeah, everybody sees the value, and there's no doubt that it's something that they're going to allow. It's going to be here to stay.
Yeah.
Maybe talk a little bit about how you're using AI to help build out Enforcer, and then we can talk about how that can translate into the client environment.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll talk to you a little bit about it, like right inside the product, right? If you've been in the space for a while, and most MSPs who are trying to, wrestle with Microsoft policy creation, alignment, and those kinds of things, it can be a really deep technical, understanding of it, both from what your technicians are trying to execute and what you're trying to communicate to your clients. So just a small thing inside our, well, actually, the big thing inside our product is, as you know, if you if you get deep into the guts of Microsoft, you're looking at JSON code to tell you exactly what that policy does, right?
Was just looking at some this morning, Jake.
Right, and it's, it's code, right? So
Yep.
what, for instance, we put an AI interpreter, a context interpreter inside the product, so that anybody, whether it's a technician that's looking at it or an owner, can look at exactly what the impact of that policy is, right? And if you're running the current customer policy against your baseline and they're not compliant, right? There's a deviation from what you believe is the best practice for that particular policy. You're going to want to know if you're going to switch it to their current policy to the one you recommend. What's the impact of that? Is it high, low, medium? What will the users at my organizations that I'm managing experience as a result of flicking the switch on this particular policy? So that's AI inside the product, and not the least of which is, okay. Obviously, all our engineering teams are super smart on AI, so we're using it to make all of our teams throughout the company super efficient. Me, how do I use it? Look, I'm not a copywriter, right? And in order for me to put the number of, the kinds of content that I want inside of the MSPs that we work with, I'm looking at all of our assets, right? And I'm trying to practice what I preach by, I use our internal co-pilot, first and foremost, to take all of the assets that we have, the best practices that we know, the communications that we have, and put that into content that's executable and actionable by MSPs. And I use Copilot for all that. I use Gamma for presentation creation. Right. I'm not a PowerPoint genius expert or whatever. And getting the resources internally, whether it's to ask my marketing team or a designer or anybody to create content, but I really like to give them what is a 80% finished product, that they can put the finishing touches on, so they're not burdened by what I need all the time. So I'm using it myself to create content in context with what our customers need. Our engineering teams are using it every day. So if you're not, look, and we've been doing this a really long time. It takes a lot. It takes a little bit of effort to go learn it, learn the limitations, data security ourselves, like setting the right chat GPT settings to not share your data with the model,
Yep.
right? To the learning model, all those things are super important. So we're using it. I'm using it every day. There's not a
Yeah.
day that goes by that I don't use it.
And I think, obviously us being in the IT industry, it's been proven that we're all using it more than traditional businesses. So I
Yeah.
think, it's a little bit of that. In order to empower and kind of teach others, we have to learn, get deep and learn. And that's no different than everything else we've done. I
Yeah.
mean, you've been around long enough, like I have, Jake, that you've seen the cycles,
Yeah.
when it took people a while to let go of their Exchange servers and go to Office 365.
Yeah.
It took a while for cloud first mentality to come in.
Yeah.
Remote workforce came with, due to forced activities, right, through the
Yeah.
COVID
And
period and kind of getting adjusted and figuring
you're
out policies and procedures for that. And now
yeah.
we've got AI as a tool and a disruptive tool at that,
Yep.
but it's also something that everybody's trying to figure out, where do we put those guardrails and
That's
safeguards?
right. So to your point, if you're doing this long enough, there's pattern recognition out there for
Yep.
our MSPs that will notice it right away, right? You can go back to 2005 with RMM, right? All of a sudden now managed services can be charged at a fixed rate because you can deliver those services real super efficiently remotely,
Yep.
right? We go 10 years of just optimizing, automating, and getting that stuff right, and then kind of an inflection point which we probably didn't see coming. Um, Bitcoin, right? And why is Bitcoin here in terms of what we do in MSP? Like, well, 2015 is when ransomware really hit the marketplace, so to speak. And why did it? Well, because now you can monetize it and ransom it with almost untraceable cash.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So all MSPs at that point, 2015, now instead of just having to be a trusted advisor and an IT outsource organization that helps companies, now they have to be cybersecurity experts, right? So then you see tool proliferation within MSPs because they've got to get on top of this cybersecurity issue, right? And then we have COVID in 2020, and now all those networks that you secured, all those firewalls you put in place, all those switches that you optimized and ports that you closed and things that you did. Now that network spread out over the masses because everybody's working remotely, and we went from physical infrastructure to dispersed computing and networking and security, and things shifted from infrastructure to identity. Now we come to 2025 and 2026, where we're getting ready. AI's here, right? And the tenant is the new server, for lack of a better metaphor. And securing the tenant and the data around it is now super important. But as always, with all of these kind of inflection points in our industry, massive opportunity for MSPs because SMBs, for the most part, they don't know it. They don't understand it. They're all using AI tools, but they don't know anything about the data security, and that's what's putting them at risk. And where MSPs can now jump into that space once again, and solve those problems for companies so that they're getting all the benefit from what's available to them without the risk that's associated with it.
Yeah, I mean, when you talk about that, I always like to say security never goes out of style, but there is a little bit of security saturation in
Yeah,
the conversations that are
yeah,
being had with the customers. And I see some of the best performing MSPs are kind of changing that security saturation
yeah,
conversation away from the tools they're using. They're just there. They're the
yeah.
table
Can't talk
stakes
about
that
your
help
tools.
us build that.
Yeah,
And they're trying to talk more in a risk-based conversation.
yeah,
Help us understand what you're trying to secure, help us try to understand what you're trying
yeah,
to operate, and how do we take calculated risks to allow the flexibility that users need. We were talking earlier
yeah.
about the how hard do you want to lock down your environment? Do I need a new conditional policy today,
Right,
right?
right, right.
But
Yeah,
in doing that, helping them understand what might be at risk monetarily, reputationally, those kind of things as well, and then taking those calculated risks. And it's really a huge opportunity for the MSPs to up level their game and take almost more of a management consultant role in the process
yeah,
as well.
yeah. I think when you're at the beginning of these cycles, right? Folks who are forward thinking from an MSP perspective and a technology provider perspective are going to be out in front of it, right? Whether that's to make sure you ensure the retention of your existing clients, that you're providing the value that's unique, or whether it's a competitive differentiator for acquiring a new client, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, the fact is that people aren't waking up in the morning saying, "I really like some more security today. I'm feeling a little bit too free." Right?
Yep.
You're not going to get that from your clients. So part of the journey that we want to bring our partners on is like kind of meet them where they are. What kinds of things are they hearing from their clients, right? So for me, from a go to market perspective, I always try to put um, a salesperson at an MSP in the right frame of mind to have a great conversation with their clients and prospects. And that first and foremost starts with how does that client or company make money? What are the critical workflows within the business? What are the absolute most important assets within that company? Right. If it's an engineering firm, it's probably designs. Right.
Yep.
If it's a construction company, it's probably their bill of materials and their proposals and the kinds of things that are super important.
Yeah, the
I
IP
think
that they create, right?
I think as any go-to-market person for an MSP, if you can understand how your clients make money, right? What are the critical workflows within the business? And you can do three things for that client. You can help them reduce costs and be more efficient. You can help them mitigate risk, and you can help them with making more money and making their customers happier. And if you focus on those business results instead of your security stack, for instance, because let's be honest, we all love our security stacks, but small they don't care. Customers don't care about it, frankly.
They don't care. And honestly, and Jake, I think you and I talked about this in previous discussions. The people now holding positions of responsibility, most of them are digital natives. When we first
Yeah,
started our
yeah,
careers, we were talking to people that had to be educated on what the systems can do because they still were not, commonplace inside
yeah,
organizations.
yeah,
Now you've got folks that are, 40 and under that are starting to take leadership roles that have had technology their entire
yeah,
lifetimes, and they're not concerned at all about the speeds, feeds, and the properties behind it. They
mm,
want to know where the gaps are and how it's going to propel their business forward. And that's all they're
yeah,
looking at. How they're going to protect their business and
yeah.
propel it forward, period.
So you're absolutely right about that. And here's the thing about the digital natives: like when they walk into a business, they're bringing their own device, and they want everything on their phone, right? Like I know that when folks who are coming out of college now, entering the workplace, there's no question in my mind they can get a majority of their job done off their phone, right? So when I work with partners on go to market, like even something as writing an email and making sure it's under X amount of words, hits
Yep.
the points that you want, is bulleted and can fit on a single screen without scrolling on a phone, like that's just meeting your client where they are in terms of how they consume information, right? And then
Yeah, I
how do
think
you get how do you get a conversation scheduled with them? The best way to do it is to make sure they consume what you're sending them to kind of ask for that conversation.
you're spot on, Jake. I always say I think our English teachers that taught us would cringe now if they see the scannable formats we send emails in. Paragraphs are now broken up not because of content, but because of visuals. Visual
Yeah,
ability to read
no, that's
and
exactly right.
read.
Yeah,
But
there's fact is you get 10 seconds of time in an email from someone that even opens it, right? And we all know that humans read at X rate in general. At what level? And if you can get your best content in within the 10 seconds that they give you to get a reaction to what you're sending, it's super important. And then you can give them the bigger detail later when when you have a better kind of environment for having that kind of detailed conversation, right?
yep, no doubt. Awesome, Jake. Well, so it really sounds like you've embraced AI into your pattern,
Yeah.
content creation, things like that. Obviously, your role being customer facing and partner enablement, it's a great way to utilize those tools. Do you see any other ways, or have you been hearing other ways that really people have been bringing AI into their go-to-market plan beyond, some of the things that you've been doing at Enforcer?
Yeah, I think like look, here's where all the pressure points are now on go to market organizations. It's like it's a content driven market, right? Um, Many of us are getting attention either from our customers or our prospects through social media, newsletters, blog posts, those kinds of things. And those assets, you got to have an appetite and a way to create those assets over time. And AI is a great way to do it, right? If you can go to Copilot and you can say, I want to write a 500-word blog. I need one per month for my newsletter. Let's break those down into 3 assets that I can share on social media over the course of the next couple of weeks. Like if you think about your, typical MSP organization, do you have a dedicated copywriter? Do you have an outsourced marketing firm? Do you have somebody on staff? Like it gets challenging to create that content over and over and over again. So that's where we see them using AI. You can take a customer case study that's, 1,000 words, couple thousand words with graphics, and you can break that down into 3 or 4 different assets that you can use across all of your end client or and prospect communication. So yeah, we're seeing AI used in certainly in content creation, right? And whether that's an outsourced marketing person, an internal person, or a salesperson just trying to figure that out. You know what? Taking all of your proposals that you've got inside your company, and it's in a SharePoint file server, and you're internal, and you want to go like, hey, look, I've answered these RFPs a million times. What do our typical answers look like? So you don't always have to go to a technical person to get those answers. So when you think about the repetitive tasks and the things that take a lot of your time and the things that you've done well before, if you have all that information, you organize it and secure it properly. That's the way that you can really start to get a force multiplier on output, and that's what you want to do.
It's funny when you say that too. I think you just hit upon something that people forget. A piece of content isn't just a single time and place that you can use that, and
Mm,
cutting it up and using it in multiple
yeah,
formats and repeating it. Everybody struggles with, what am I going to say today? Right. Well, maybe you don't have to say anything new today. Go find something you
yeah,
said 6 months ago, rephrase it, restate it, use AI to kind of rework it, but also take your different mediums like short video clips, things
yeah,
like that, and really repurpose that data. So for those of you struggling with the big picture marketing, Jake unwittingly uncovered, one of those things right here, which is use AI to get you to the gate, but then make sure you're repurposing that data in
yeah,
various, formats and across different channels,
yeah.
to make it worthwhile.
I think the biggest thing any salesperson, business owner can do is just really understand their clients, right?
Yeah.
What have you done? There's pattern recognition there. You'll see almost every company that we work with, MSP that we work with, has a coalescence of clients either around a very specific security measure that they want. They're compliance based, so they go out for those companies, or they're in a vertical market, and you tend to just be expert there. Those stories are gold, right? Those are the things that resonate with future clients, right?
Yep.
You've solved the problem before. You know how to do it. It's a relevant story to that prospect. If they're another, law firm in your town and you solved the same problem for another really well-known law firm, right? You know exactly what the challenges are, what you did, how it works. And if you're sharing that kind of information with a prospect, hey, I'm glad, we work with other lawyers just like you, right? Here's some of the things that we've done. Here's some of the risks that they saw in their business. Do you see similar things? Then you're not talking about, what your security stack is. You're talking about real world problems that face those kinds of companies that you've solved before. So there's relevance, there's empathy, there's understanding, there's validity, and there's social proof. And if you just go retell a couple of your customer stories to like prospects, you're going to get a lot further than you are with a typical kind of technical review of what you do for a living.
Awesome. So, Jake, we're kind of getting near the end of our time. I don't know if there's any closing thoughts you'd like to share with the community today.
I do. So the thing about AI adoption that's super important is that most small businesses are using the tools without having a great foundation in place. I liken it to great curtains, nice windows. Love that picture hanging on the wall. Hey, your foundation's falling down and your house is about to fall over, right? So the foundational underpinnings for AI are in the customer assets and data that for the most part resides inside of Microsoft products, right? And understanding how to secure the Microsoft 365 tenant is the absolute fundamental underpinning of effective AI security and usage for your clients so they get the most out of the tools, particularly Copilot. The thing about Copilot is, with ChatGPT or with GPT-5 that's now out there, and Microsoft's, availability, business premium with the E5 security add-on that's now available for there, and Copilot that's available for managed service providers, it's a significantly easier to manage than other tools. So go get your Copilot, game on, right? Because that's where you're going to help most of your clients. That would be my kind of parting. And
Awesome.
Enforcer's there to help you do that.
Awesome. So, everybody, I've got the address for Enforcer here right up on the screen for those of you that might be watching visually with us. For those of you that are listening, it'll be in the show notes as well. Additionally, if you want to get in touch with Jake, best way probably is on LinkedIn. Connect with him there.
Thank you.
And, he'll be happy to engage you both, around what Enforcer's doing and, share his AI stories and hear yours too.
Yeah.
So,
horror stories along with some successes.
Yep. So definitely, connect with them there. From my seat, Jake, it's always a pleasure to have you join me. It's been a while since you and I got to catch up.
Yeah.
I always learn something during these sessions, and certainly some of your practical applications around AI have given me some food for thought. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on again. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, you bet. And, keep an eye out for Enforcer, guys. This is a company that Jake has joined recently that I wasn't aware of, and I'm seeing them start to show up everywhere. And to that end, Jake, where are you guys going to be over the course of the next couple months?
We're going to be everywhere. Like you've seen us everywhere. We're going to continue to do that. So all of the major market events we'll be at, whether, the Kaseya events, the Datto events, the ConnectWise has been a great partner with us, and we're doing basically all their events that we can. Huntress road shows we've been out on the road for, so you'll see us out there, and we're visiting, clients everywhere. Like we're in front of our partners all the time, either virtually or in person. We're very much a hands-on organization, both in terms of exposure and assistance for our partners. So you're going to see us everywhere.
Great. Well, I look forward to that. I look forward to seeing you on the road myself, Jake. And certainly, if anybody's out there at any of the shows, look for Enforcer, get to know them a little bit, and certainly stop by and say hi to Jake in the process.
Thanks, Brian.
All right, Jake.
Appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I'm going to let you get back to Evolve in the great town of Denver, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, Brian. Take care.
You bet.